Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want you to confront something uncomfortable about attraction that most men misunderstand completely. And once you see it clearly, your dating experiences will never feel confusing in the same way again. Stay with me and listen closely, because what I am about to explain may challenge the beliefs you have been carrying for years. If you have ever noticed a woman becoming more interested when you pull back or stop chasing her, it is not random. It is rooted in deep psychological mechanisms that influence how desire is formed and maintained. Many men assume that giving more attention automatically creates more attraction. But human psychology does not work in a linear, reward-based way. Attraction often grows in environments where there is perceived value, uncertainty, and emotional tension. When everything is too available, too predictable, or too easy, the brain tends to categorize it as less stimulating, not because the person lacks worth, but because novelty and challenge activate stronger attention responses. This is where many men unintentionally create the opposite of what they want. They overinvest early, over-explain, over-pursue, and gradually reduce the space for the other person to experience curiosity. Curiosity is one of the strongest drivers of emotional attachment. When a woman cannot fully predict your next move, her mind starts to fill in the gaps. And in those gaps, imagination amplifies interest. This does not mean ignoring someone is a strategy to manipulate. It means understanding that healthy attraction requires balance between presence and space, between emotional availability and personal boundaries. When a man is overly available, he unintentionally signals that his time and attention carry little cost. And in psychology, perceived value often increases when access is not guaranteed. This is not about playing games. It is about self-respect, clarity, and maintaining a life that does not revolve entirely around one person. Women who seem obsessed are often responding to emotional signals that indicate independence, confidence, and direction, not dependency or desperation. When you carry yourself with grounded self-assurance and you do not overchase, you create a dynamic where interest develops naturally rather than being forced. And that distinction is critical because genuine attraction thrives in environments where both individuals feel they are choosing each other, not settling for attention out of convenience. Pause for a moment and reflect on how. Now listen carefully, because what I am about to explain will reveal why distance often intensifies emotional attachment in ways that feel confusing to many men when you stop chasing or reduce your constant availability. Something subtle begins to shift in her perception. Your absence creates a psychological gap, and the human mind is naturally wired to seek closure and meaning within that gap. She begins to wonder why your behavior changed, what you are doing, whether she still has your attention, and whether she might be losing something of value. This internal questioning is not conscious strategy. It is automatic cognition designed to resolve uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the strongest activators of attention and emotional engagement. When a woman feels certain that you will always be there no matter how she behaves, her mind has no urgency to evaluate your value. In contrast, when your presence is not guaranteed, her brain begins to assign significance to your actions, and your absence becomes noticeable. This does not mean she is playing games. It means her perception is responding to contrast. Humans evaluate value relative to context, not in isolation. If you are always available, your behavior blends into the background of her expectations. But when your behavior changes, the contrast captures attention, and attention is the first step toward emotional investment. Many men misinterpret this as rejection, when in reality it is often the beginning of recalibration. She is not necessarily pulling away because she lost interest. She may actually be adjusting her internal model of you, trying to understand where she stands and what kind of man you are. This is why maintaining your own goals, routines, and priorities is essential. It keeps you anchored in your identity rather than reacting emotionally to every fluctuation in her behavior. When you remain centered, you communicate stability and self-direction, which are qualities that naturally sustain attraction without forcing outcomes. Remember, attraction is not just about how much you give, but how clearly you maintain your own life while allowing someone to choose their level of engagement with you. That mindset alone changes how you show up in every interaction, because you stop negotiating your worth and start expressing it through consistent behavior, calm presence, and clear boundaries, which in turn shifts how others perceive and respond to you over time in subtle but powerful ways, very naturally and consistently. What most men fail to recognize is that emotional intensity is often amplified not by constant proximity, but by contrast between presence and absence. When everything is steady and predictable, the emotional system becomes less reactive. But when there is variation, the mind pays closer attention. This is because the brain is designed to prioritize changes in environment over static conditions. So when your behavior shifts from always available to selectively available, it introduces a new pattern that her mind has to interpret and adapt to. This adaptation process creates cognitive engagement, and cognitive engagement often evolves into emotional investment when paired with positive interactions. This is why women can begin to think about a man more frequently when he is not constantly reinforcing his presence. Every hour, every message, every call creates a baseline expectation, and when that baseline is disrupted, the mind notices it strongly. This noticing is not just awareness, it is the beginning of emotional recalibration. She starts comparing how she felt when you were more present versus how she feels when your attention is no longer guaranteed. And in that comparison, your value is often reassessed upward because scarcity in attention can be interpreted as higher selectivity rather than lack of interest. The key here is not to withdraw abruptly or create confusion, but to maintain a balanced rhythm where your life remains full and your attention is given with intention rather than obligation. When a man has structure, purpose, and direction, his availability becomes a choice, not a reaction. And that difference is deeply felt, even if it is not consciously articulated. Women are sensitive to emotional consistency and self-direction because these traits signal stability over time. When you are grounded in your own pursuits, your communication carries a different tone. It is not seeking validation or approval. It is sharing presence from a position of independence. This naturally creates a dynamic where she feels she must meet you at your level, rather than expecting you to adjust endlessly to hers. Over time, this creates mutual respect and curiosity, which are essential components of lasting attraction. And when curiosity remains alive, emotional interest tends to deepen rather than fade, because the connection continues to feel engaging rather than predictable or routine, in a way that keeps her mentally and emotionally invested without pressure or force. When a man disappears emotionally in a controlled and healthy way, not out of fear but out of self-direction, something powerful happens inside the other person's perception. She begins to experience a form of emotional contrast that reshapes how she values his presence. This is not about manipulation, it is about how human attachment responds to change. When your attention is no longer constant, her brain does not simply accept the absence, it begins to analyze it. She may replay past interactions, notice what felt different, and become more aware of the moments where she felt connected to you, because those moments now stand out against the backdrop of your reduced availability. This reflection strengthens memory encoding and emotional association, which is why distance can sometimes make feelings feel more intense rather than weaker. The mind tends to assign greater significance to what feels less accessible and more meaningful over time. This is where many men misunderstand their role. They assume that stepping back will automatically create attraction. But if that step back comes from insecurity or inconsistency, it creates confusion rather than curiosity. The difference lies in intention and internal stability. When your behavior is guided by a grounded sense of self, rather than a reaction to her actions, your absence communicates that your life continues with or without her approval, and that you are not dependent on her responses to feel fulfilled. This signals emotional independence, which is often perceived as strength and stability, traits that naturally sustain interest. Furthermore, when you re-engage after periods of space, your interactions often feel more intentional and focused because they are not driven by constant access, but by genuine presence. This contrast between absence and meaningful engagement creates a cycle where attention feels valuable rather than expected. And in that space, emotional investment can grow organically without pressure or chasing, allowing both individuals to experience the connection as something chosen rather than something required. And that distinction quietly shapes the depth and direction of attraction over time. At this point, you need to understand a deeper truth about human attachment that most men overlook entirely. Women do not become obsessed with a man simply because he ignores them. Obsession is rarely about neglect. It is about emotional impact combined with uncertainty and perceived value. When a man is able to occupy space in her mind without overwhelming her with constant access, her thoughts begin to circle around unanswered questions. What is he thinking? What is his life like? Why is he not reacting the way others do? These questions create mental engagement, and the mind tends to return to what it cannot fully resolve. This is why unpredictability paired with positive emotional experiences can intensify interest over time. But there is an important distinction here. Healthy attraction develops when a man is consistent in who he is, while being selective with his time and energy, not when he plays confusing or inconsistent games. Consistency builds trust, while selectivity creates value. Together, they form a balanced dynamic that encourages genuine curiosity rather than anxiety. When you respect your own time and maintain priorities outside of any relationship, you communicate that your world does not revolve around instant responses or constant validation. This naturally filters interactions because the women who are aligned with that energy will respond positively, while those seeking excessive attention may lose interest. This is not a loss, it is alignment, and alignment is what leads to stable and meaningful connections over time. Another key element is emotional restraint. When you avoid over-explaining, over-pursuing, or over-investing too early, you allow space for the other person to meet you halfway. This creates a sense of mutual effort rather than one-sided pursuit. And mutual effort is essential for long-term attraction because it reinforces equality within the interaction. When a woman feels that she is also investing her attention and energy, she becomes more aware of the connection and more protective of it. Not because she is being chased, but because she is choosing to participate in something that feels balanced and real. This is where deeper emotional attachment begins to form naturally, without force, without pressure, and without losing yourself in the process of trying to gain someone else's attention. And that is the foundation many men miss completely. Now bring everything together, because this is where clarity replaces confusion and where you start to see relationships through a more grounded psychological lens. If a woman appears obsessed, it is not simply because you ignored her. It is because a combination of factors aligned in a way that activated her curiosity, emotional engagement, and perception of value at the same time. Your behavior communicated independence rather than neediness. Your presence was felt but not overwhelming, and your absence was noticeable but not chaotic. This balance creates a mental environment where she feels both comfortable and intrigued, and that combination is rare enough to hold attention for longer periods of time. However, it is crucial that you do not reduce this understanding into a formula for control, because attraction built on manipulation does not last and often leads to instability. The real takeaway is about self-mastery. When you focus on building your own direction, improving your mindset, maintaining discipline in your routines, and developing a life that is fulfilling beyond any single relationship, you naturally embody qualities that others respond to with interest and respect. Women are not reacting to tricks, they are reacting to signals of emotional strength, consistency, and authenticity. When you stop over-chasing and start showing up as a man who has standards, boundaries, and a clear sense of identity, your interactions change because you are no longer seeking validation. You are expressing presence from a place of stability, and that shift is felt, even if it is not spoken. The reason some women seem more invested when you pull back is because your behavior removes pressure while increasing curiosity. But the foundation remains: your self-respect and your ability to remain grounded regardless of her reactions. This is what creates healthy attraction over time. Not games, not confusion, but clarity, patience, and a calm confidence that does not need to announce itself. If you take nothing else from this, understand that the goal is not to make someone obsessed. The goal is to become someone whose presence is meaningful, whose absence is noticeable, and whose value is recognized naturally through the way you carry yourself in everyday life. And when that happens, the dynamic of attraction becomes far less confusing and far more aligned with mutual interest, respect, and genuine connection.